5'6", that's the
Yeah. Nah, you're not that short. You're still
I
taller
usually
than
just
Greg.
rely on my weight. Who looks at that anyway?
All right.
We gotta talk.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to begin here momentarily. If you can ensure your cell phones are off or on vibrate,
Listen up, Pinocchio.
and council members ensure your microphones are turned on. Today is March 24th, 2025. It's a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council, but before we begin our regular legislative meeting, we do have individual committee meetings this evening, and we'll start with City Properties, Parks, and Recreation with Mr. Easterling.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today's date, March 24th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in council chambers. All members are present, and the guest is noted. We have no new legislation at this time. We have one pending legislation. It's ordinance number 37-2025. It is an ordinance appropriating $15,000 from the unappropriated items of the Parks Revolving Fund to the capital budget of the Parks Revolving Fund to be used for fencing a new restroom at the College Park and declaring an emergency. Do we have any remarks from the members? From the gallery? We have no miscellaneous, unless someone has a remark. Do we have any remarks from council?
I have some.
Yes?
I just wanted to let you guys know that the sleds are now gone at Waltz Park because it is officially spring and no more snow is welcome here in Barberton.
Well, I hope that's true.
Did you say no snow is welcome in Barberton?
No snow is welcome.
I agree.
I'd like to second
Nice.
that.
Yeah, I agree.
All in
We can only
favor?
hope.
With that, any other remarks? Anyone in the gallery got anything to say? With that, make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
No
And
second.
you'll second. We adjourn at 6:02 p.m.
Thank you. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today's date's March 24th, 2025. It's 18:02 hours. Bring the Public Welfare and Safety Committee to order. We're in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, including myself as chair, Mr. Easterling co-chair, Ms. Gerhart, and Mr. Greer. All other council members are present. And guests noted on my sheet. We have one piece of legislation that's been sitting there for, well, since February 24th. And that would be the tentative agreement with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association Blue Gold Bargaining Unit. Talking with Ms. Eisman, they may not get that actually done by our 60-day time limit. So I'd like to have a motion to suspend that.
We'll do that and miscellaneous.
Okay,
And then-
we'll do that. Other than that, I have no requests for legislation, no pending legislation. Do I have any comments from my committee or questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Since it does involve public welfare and safety, Mr. Tedecki, Director Shreve, any update on Van Buren and South Van Buren and Snyder with those poles? I seen them working again today.
Yes, the update is the poles were shipped. There's an error in the fabrication by Union Metal. They shipped the largest pole back, and they're trying to figure out the most cost-effective, speediest way to either remake or fix the pole so it's structurally sound and acceptable to us. And as soon as I get a schedule back on that, I'll let everybody know. But we're on indefinite pause until that's figured out.
Was it just one of the poles?
Just one of the poles, the main pole.
So are they able to still install the other
No.
ones, or?
I mean, they might be able to put some work in, but they won't be able to get fully functional until this last pole.
Right, but they can at least do what they can with what they have?
I'll give you an update as soon as I know.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Heidi?
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. I want to commend the police and fire department and everybody else that was involved in the 15th Street and Brady Avenue incident. Glad it came to a peaceful ending. Thank you, Mr. Polachek. Do I have anything else? President Greer? Do we want to suspend that?
You'll need the vote from the body, not the committee.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why I said we'll do it in miscellaneous.
Okay.
Wait, Mr. Haddock?
It wasn't read to the floor, was it?
No,
No, it's not.
it's going to reach a time limit, and
Then
we
the-
need to suspend the
The
rule.
committee does it, not the floor then.
What's that?
The committee would do it, not the floor then. Since
Okay,
it's never
well,
been read.
go ahead and it's council rule, you'll invoke council rule 702 to suspend council rule 403 to a timeline.
For the 60-day limit
Yeah,
for dissent committee?
a timeline to be determined or,
Give me
It
those
can be
numbers
open.
again, please.
702 to suspend 403.
yep, 403.
Can I get a motion to suspend Rule 702 or invoke
703 to suspend 403.
703?
702.
702.
702 to suspend 403.
Can I get a motion to invoke Rule 702 to suspend Rule 403?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passed. So we'll hold that till we get the particulars of it. Anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Can you get a second?
I'll second that.
We are adjourned at 18:06 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Next up is Rules Marketing Development. Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to bring the Rules Marketing and Development Committee to order. It is Monday, March 24th, 2025. The time is 6:06 p.m., and we are in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, including myself as chair, Mrs. Beck as co-chair, Mr. Heidick, and President Greer. All their council members and others noted on my sheet. We have no requests for legislation at this time. I do have two pending. Ordinance 38-2025, presented by myself, amending Ordinance 144-2009, posting places, and ordinance amending Ordinance 144-009, designating 6 posting places used for public notice for all resolutions and ordinances for the city of Barberton by adding 3 new posting places and declaring an emergency. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Also presented by myself, amending Ordinance 98-2022, designated outdoor refreshment area, and ordinance amending Ordinance 98-2022 by amending Section 6, designated hours in operation from Thursday through Saturday to Monday through Sunday, and declaring an emergency. Has anybody thought of any questions or comments on that? Okay, and then we are going to be starting back up discussing rules at my next Rules Marketing and Development Committee. I know Mrs. Beck has submitted one to me, President Greer has submitted some, and we still need to get through what's already written to see if there's any updates needed, so just so everybody's prepared. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion from the gallery body? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:08 p.m.
Thank you. All right, City Utilities, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call this meeting to order today, March 24th. We are in council chambers. All members of my committee are present. Myself as chair, Jennifer Hager, Emily Beck, and Justin Greer, and all others noted. We have no new requests for legislation tonight, and we have no pending legislation. Do we have any miscellaneous for city utilities from the council, from the gallery? Hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jennifer. We are adjourned at 6:10. With that, I pass.
Thank you. Last but not least, Finance and Personnel, Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. It is Monday, March 24th, 2025, 6:10 p.m. here in council chambers. All members of my committee are present, which includes myself as chair, Mr. Heidig, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Greer, as well as all other council members and guests as noted on my sheet. We have some pending legislation this evening, with the first being the budget. That's ordinance number 22-2025. This will be the third reading. I do have some changes. I don't believe everybody received the email. So I'll go over those here. And then there's some other things I wanted to discuss before we move on. So a lot of this we've already talked about, but I'll just run through it. The first request would be for the $10,000 out of the finance professional services, and it would amend the finance department operations and maintenance budget of the general fund by reducing it $10,000. Mr. Flaker had talked about that. I believe that was last week.
Yeah.
So that was one change we were going to make. Next, we have for the removal of the capital budget of safety, HR, and civil service. Just in general. Next, to add back $2,000 into HR's budget. And then moving $18,000 of capital and planning to operations, which would just increase the planning department's operation and maintenance budget in the general fund by $18,000. So those are some of the changes that we have talked about previously. We did have some questions for Mr. Patterson. I see he's not here. I wanted just a little bit of clarification on Waltz Park. Mayor, I had talked to you about that Friday. If you wouldn't mind going over what that was, because Mr. Harris said that he had a conversation with Mr. Patterson and the amounts weren't matching up, so if you could just give us,
I don't recall the exact amount, but the plan for Waltz Park is to redo the basketball court. And we know that there's some other issues that we want to address, but again, I don't have those amounts in front of me. I want to say it was around 70,000, 72 for the basketball court.
75,000.
75. So.
Oh, that's just for the basketball court?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Mr. Harris?
Today when I talked to Mr. Patterson on the phone about this, he told me it was going to cost roughly $25,000 to resurface the basketball court, reline it, excuse me, new basketball hoops and backboards, I guess. That was $25,000. So the other $50,000, I don't know where that's going. That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Did he talk to you about, so I'm not sure if it's.
He said something about some other parks
Okay.
that were close to here, and I said, we don't have any other parks
Okay,
close
yeah,
to
I'll
here.
get pocket parks.
I
That's
guess.
what I wrote in my
Yeah.
notes, pocket
Okay, so I'll
parks.
talk about that in a minute. So I wasn't sure if I think you cleared this up then, it's about $75,000 to like totally grind up and lay new asphalt and everything for a new basketball court. We've been doing some overlays, which is a lot less expensive, so that's the $25,000.
Yeah.
So pocket parks are small community parks that are low maintenance, that kind of, if you have a piece of property that you can't really do much with, you can turn it into a community pocket park. So we've been exploring 2 pocket parks. The first one would be in the 1st Ward at the intersection of Hazelwood and Worcester Road North. There's a triangle piece of property there right at the intersection that we own, just an odd shape. To the left, if you're looking at the property, if you're standing on Worcester Road North and you're looking at the property, to the left is a rental unit. Driveway is on the right-hand side of the house, so the driveway separates the house from our parcel. I believe it's empty now, but we've had a lot of problems with that rental, kind of going on to our space there. I believe we acquired this property a number of years ago. That was a home that was demoed. I don't recall off the top of my head. The thought was to create a nice little pocket park. Not very expensive, small little maybe limestone or asphalt walkway through there, maybe some benches, some trees, a fence around it. So if you Google pocket parks, there's a lot of things you can do with it, right? It's just a small, low-maintenance park for the neighborhood. Because we're always cognizant of adding more work for our maintenance departments as well. The second one is not owned by the city currently. It's at the intersection of 7th and West Tusk. It's across the street from the Corner Cafe. It's owned by the Presbyterian Church. Their membership there has gone down quite a bit over the years. I was baptized there. I've been a member there for a long time. They can't maintain it like we would like them to. The thought is to acquire it. If we acquire it, I've had discussions with them, if we acquire it, they would want it kept as a park for the neighborhood kids. If we acquire it, it gives us more oversight. So one of the complaints is there's people, it's geared for small kids, right? So one of the complaints is that there's kind of older kids hanging out there, maybe teenagers. Well, if there's no sign saying no trespassing or things of that nature, we're kind of limited in what we can do to patrol it, because it's not ours either, right? So if we control it, we own it, we put up a sign that's for this age or younger, then we have a little more oversight on who's there and can kind of usher people out as needed. So it's already a park, technically. Like to spruce it up, like to acquire it, spruce it up, and have it a nice little pocket park. I've been talking to some of the business owners downtown. Some of them would like to acquire it and put in parking for their business. The church does not want a parking lot there. So this is not a done deal by any means. We want to get the budget passed, start looking at plans. If this does go through, they want it kind of in the agreement that it will not become a parking lot, and they would have first right of refusal if we were ever to get rid of the park or the area. Talking to some of the business owners, they don't mind the presence of a park as long as it's maintained, right? And so we've been looking at ways of kind of making sure that that happens. But also looking at, can we make it functional in the summertime for, in the evening? Is there a way to put up an inflatable screen, and maybe with the door you can make use of that park where the kids are not there and you can do other things with it. So day it's geared for kids, and in the evening it's geared for more adults. So we've been looking at all those kind of scenarios. So those are the two pocket parks we've been looking at. So again, being cognizant of additional maintenance on our crews, and making sure that if we do go through with it, that we've got some funding there to spruce it up. And it may take some time to do that as well. Yes?
Thanks, Mayor. You talked about us having control over it, like being able, to police it. Have we talked to the church, like maybe put up some signs or?
I'm not sure if they've had that discussion with the police department.
Anything like that?
So, I mean, and you know as well as I do, there's times where, the police are running from one call to the next. They don't have time to check on things all
And
the
that would
time.
go for if it was a city park too. I mean, we have those issues all over the city.
Right. So like, improving the lighting, and I don't know the finances of the church. I don't know the number of congregation or anything like that, their expenses or anything. But improving the lighting, making sure that the businesses in the area know that it's something usable for them as well. So it's just very, very preliminary, but we've had those discussions with the church, and they are interested in signing it over to us, feeding it over to us under certain guidelines. Yes.
So I know that discussion about that park downtown by Corner Cafe was kind of stalled for a little while because they didn't have a pastor down there. So is it a pastor, deacon?
Reverend pastor.
A leader. Do they have one then?
I'm not sure. Last time I talked to them, I talked to some of the board, the deacons, so I'm not sure.
They do not, Emily.
We don't have them.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it fair comparison to say an example of a pocket park for a visual aid would be like what's catty corner from the YMCA by the Summit County DD Board? I believe the YMCA owns that corner and has basically a
DD
small
maintains
park-like
it.
thing.
Yeah,
Is it a fair comparison to say that is what a pocket park could look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is used in the fashion that I envision a pocket park being viewed or used. But yeah, that could be a fair example. Now, the history with that one was that the goal was to put the cannon back there. And it just never happened. So,
Thank you.
but yeah, that's I guess, a fair comparison. Yes.
Thank you. So I just wanted to update my notes. Waltz would cost the full 75 or close
You know,
to?
it sounds like they're just doing the overlay, so about 25,000.
So then the 50,000 would be for the pocket park at Hazelwood and Worcester Road North. And then you would also need it to, because we own that land, but then we would have to purchase the land at 7th and Tusk,
No.
that park?
No, the discussion I've had is that they would deed it over to us for free.
Okay, so then the money would be spent in the lighting or the signage or the sprucing it up.
Fencing, yeah, things like that.
Do you think that those two pocket parks would take 50,000?
You know, I don't know. We put a placeholder in there as the budget allows. As you guys know, prices have changed quite a bit. So when we start talking about the budget in August, the price could be one thing. We really don't get quotes until later on. But, you know, some places hold quotes for 6 months, some of them hold them for 30 days. You know, and if it doesn't materialize, because I have not made a presentation in front of the Parks Commission, because I want to put a plan together. And I want to do it without hiring a consultant that's going to charge us a lot. I want to get input, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not my ideas, it's everybody's working together. But I wanted some money in the budget since, you know, we're not at a risk of not meeting minimum fund balance at this point. Put the money in the budget and then start doing the due diligence. And we've been working on things over the winter time, but there's just a lot that goes into it.
So if these pocket parks wouldn't come to fruition, the money would just go back to, would stay in
fund.
parks or would go back to general?
At the end of the year, it'd go back to the general fund.
Okay, so this money wouldn't be spent on anything else then, besides these two pocket parks?
Right. We don't have any plans for it.
How often are we overlaying basketball courts versus concrete for the last 10, 12, 15 years?
I'm not sure. We did one up at McCafferty, and I can't recall what we did with that one. We've done Tusk in the years past, I don't forget how long. Brightenstein was done a number of years ago. I can't recall if that was just an overlay.
It's been a while.
So I'm not sure. We've done a few of them, but I'm not, off the top of my head, I can't recall.
And the Waltz court is not in terrible shape, it just, there's no lines or anything on it, and could use fresh right there.
So that might just be a thin overlay with new lines and things of that nature.
And since we're on parks, do you have any updates about plans for Lake Anna for this year?
So we still, in terms of the $1 million we got federal money, that did not get clawed back. So, you know, we have a working group that we're getting back up and running to talk about the visitor center. That money was earmarked for a visitor center. You know, we're always looking to make improvements at the lake in other fashions. So whether that's electrical, lighting, you know, flowers, tree trimming, everything.
Do we have a time limit on spending that 1 million at Lake Anna?
Yeah, we've got a number of years.
Oh, years, okay. That's
And so
good.
we've kind of held off on additional meetings because, you know, we hit a certain spot. We just, I want to say last week or the week before, they reached out to us with a portal. I mean, so we didn't hear anything from them for months. So our planning director entered the portal. I'll be doing that soon. So we've got every kind of communication set up with the federal government. So, yes.
Is there a percentage match on that, or is that just needs to be spent at Lake Anna for a visitor center?
That's it.
Mr. Mayor, the park, you know, property that the church owns, the wouldn't it be better to, or anybody ever thought about it, just a green space? And just have a green space where you wouldn't have to worry about age limits or lighting, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
upkeep or, I
Couple
mean,
benches or something.
couple benches or something. To me, that would be, you know, cost effective and solve a lot of problems with, you know, the age group and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at different scenarios,
Yeah.
kind of look at what's there now. Is the basketball court, is it usable? Because I know there's some roots popping up in there. Is the play equipment usable, right? So we inspect our play equipment each year. I don't know if they've inspected theirs. So, you know, we could, let's say it's deeded over today,
Right.
and we're gonna make green space. Well, now we've got to get all that stuff out of there. There's a cost to that. Might be minimal, but there's a cost. Deeded over to us, play equipment is perfectly fine and safe, might as well keep it. Do we, let's say the play equipment, no, we've run through all these scenarios. So you keep the play equipment, you grind up the basketball court, and you make that green space with a picnic table and some benches and stuff. To the north of the park, right against the alley, are several parking spots. Love to be able to improve those, because I think it's just gravel right now. So we've ran through some scenarios. But again, I have not presented in front of the Parks Commission about this. I wanted to get some color pictures of options, but before that, getting some more ideas and some cost estimates of what that could be. So, I mean, it's not something that if this stays in the budget that, I mean, that you would wake up tomorrow and there'd be a pocket park. You know, we would keep council informed and entering into contract and things of that nature, depending on what's purchased.
And you probably wouldn't do those plans until the church gave you that, because
Right.
why have plans if it's not ours?
Right.
Okay. Makes
And I don't know
sense.
how quickly we could turn those plans around. Again, the thought is to make a usable, fun place for the neighborhood. I've driven by quite a bit, and it's kind of hit or miss if it's being used, but it is pretty cool to see young mothers there with young children who are making use of it. Right. Any other questions?
Since we're on parks, I don't know. I know Mr. Easterling had brought up some points about the van and maybe buying a nicer engined one.
Yeah, a V6 EcoBoost and something that size, it's going to be very expensive just to operate, fuel cost, number one. And number two, it's not a longevity, they're made for F-150s. You know, they're not made to haul 12 people to Columbus. Just the sustainability of an engine like that is probably 80 to 100,000 miles, and it's going to be costly. I would think a V8 at minimum, since it's going to be a work truck, it's not really a van, it's a small shuttle bus. So we need to just, if we're going to spend the money, get something that's going to last.
Yeah. So are we allowed to recommend a better van than a V6?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we'll do Mr. Patterson will do his due diligence with the state bid pricing, and I'm not sure what the cost is with those vans, and I'm not sure what other amenities he may have in store. for that
We
van.
can buy like a used van with maybe 20,000 on it. We don't.
I don't know if used vehicles are on the state bid pricing, it's all new vehicles. So, I guess you could, but, I mean, 20,000 miles doesn't seem like a lot, but I don't know where it's coming from or anything like that, so.
Yeah. I just wondered with increasing engine size if we were going to be going up dramatically in cost.
Mr. Easterling, do you know if that cost is vastly
I
different?
run diesels in all my trucks, and I got 5500s. All my trucks are bigger than what they're buying. And for a diesel, from a V8 to a diesel, is a $10,000 upcharge. I don't know, because I don't own Fords, what goes from a V6 to a V8. But there's going to be
An increase?
5, 6, 7,000. I mean, it's going to be there. But he's got all-wheel drive. They're not going to drive in a snowstorm if you can't walk, because they're walking tours. So, I mean, the all-wheel drive could probably offset the engine cost. I did do some calling to a place in Indiana. They're really nice, but they're what they call them 3-day holds. They won't give you pricing on them. They actually have a ADA ramp, like a pickup hoist in the back, and they can put 2 wheelchairs in them. And there's still 14 passenger and a driver, so they're 15. So they're under CDL. So if you 15 and under complete is under CDL. 16 is the jumping point. So you can get something bigger than a 12 passenger. We can go up to 14 plus a driver.
Yes.
But I won't know till tomorrow on the one that I inquired about from M1 in Indiana. And this one's also in California. I don't know if the pricing includes destination, sales tax, dock fees. I don't know any of that.
That would be nice to have one with a ramp, though.
I thought if you're gonna go in, get what we need.
Yeah,
I
you're
would-
making that
I would-
type of
I'd rather
purchase.
give the extra, if we're gonna do it, spend the money
Do it right.
and do it, not wish we'd done it.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't need it until you need it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got something?
No, he answered it, my next question.
Oh,
Because I was gonna ask about if it's an upgraded type of model, if that affects the CDL, but he answered that.
yeah, we're waiting.
Well, I was waiting for Mr. Heidick to quit talking, and then, so, like I said, I spent quite a bit of time on the phone with Mr. Patterson. The hotspots that they talked about for the cameras, he said they can do away with that. So that would save some money. Truly, who's watching it? Not me. Not our police department, because they're too busy doing police work. So he told me that was $680 a month Verizon bill for the hotspots. He didn't want a monthly fee, but you know, and he wasn't able to tell me exactly where that was at in the budget. Mr. Flaker? It might have been under,
I think it was under the maintenance.
I thought it was under the park administration, but then when I asked him about it, he said no. It might be under the revolving fund, Parks Fund. Parks revolving fund, maybe? He couldn't tell me for sure. But that's $680 a month savings. So,
That's what, 8160 a year?
Isn't it in recreational programs, contractual service, professional services? I have a line,
25,000?
I have a line down that says hotspots. I must have been asking myself a question. If devices are free, what is the 25K for? Probably installation though, to install the hotspots.
He didn't say anything about a cost to that, but I'm sure there would be.
So are we suggesting to take out cameras, like there won't be cameras?
No, there would be
they
cameras. It'll still work.
has
It
a
would still
memory
operate the
card.
same way it is now.
They would have to
It's
go to
just,
the site
you wouldn't be able
I
to,
see, okay,
wouldn't be
okay.
with a hotspot, you basically could
Pull it up anywhere.
pull up,
Sure.
you know, when you're close and boom, and
At $680 a month, who's gonna sit there watching it?
I mean, if we're getting fiber throughout the city, basically, I mean, AT&T's around, Spectrum, Omni Fiber, you know, we should be able to save some money that way and jump Wi-Fi or broadband.
Yeah, definitely.
Mayor, do you know, with those hotspots, if those are closed off specifically for the cameras, or could they provide free Wi-Fi to people at the park?
Not sure.
Would that be a security risk?
Yeah, I would say that
I
would be
would-
a security issue.
I would venture to say that they were locked out specifically.
Okay.
Did you say closed circuit? So that kind of felt. So, I mean, do we need an amendment to take that money out? How we working here? How we operating that? Mr. Flaker?
Have to be an amendment if you guys want to take it out.
Are we certain? Yep.
while we're on this, and that question was just asked, when the idea is when we read it today, and I have a couple questions actually before I get into this. What you're reading off now, is that a list from people that you've, for amendments for the budget?
This came from Mr. Flaker, the adjustments that, we've all talked about here.
Okay. So when we're reading it, I'm just gonna, this is how we're gonna handle the amendments. Then this is information that we're gonna need. I'm gonna go down around the room. All right, some have amendments, some don't. I was hoping to have it all on one piece of paper.
Yeah.
But there's some downsides to that. So we'll just go around the room. If there's an amendment, they'll just motion for amendment. If there's a second, and then that person can provide the amendments to the line. You're gonna need the line items of what you're changing, right? And then we'll take a roll call vote on the floor for that specific, those amendments. And then we'll just go around the room for the amendments. And by the end of it, we should all be in line. Then we can make a motion to vote on the budget as amended. But that'll happen during the regular legislative meeting.
Is there any other budget discussion?
Couple things, if I could have the floor.
Yeah, of course.
I want to apologize to Councilperson Easterling. He had inquired about the IT budget, and there's been so much going on with the budget that I totally forgot about it last week, so thank you for reminding me. So I have everything here. I believe it's on page 34, Information Systems. So this may not, we met last Monday, Mr. Shreve and I met with our IT department, so I may not have all the answers, but I'll give you some updates here. This is another budget that came in, and for '24 came in under their budget. If you look at personnel services, this is for our, so we have an internal employee who does IT work, right? City employee. Then through Swisscog, there's two other IT professionals that work mainly on Swisscog, but they help us out as well. So they're under that Swisscog IT budget, not under this one. So we technically have three, one in-house, two that kind of float around between us and Norton. So personnel services are pretty standard. Our in-house IT individual makes more than what is there, so I'm not sure what other budgets he's being paid out of. But you see the roll-up cost there with the pension and workers' comp and Medicare. Under the operation and maintenance accounts 52,335, which lists Swisscom, uniforms, and other, which we've seen in many different budgets. This does outfit employees with equipment needed to perform their job. So that's what the IT manager gave us. So didn't give me any specifics on that, but outfitting employees with equipment to perform their job. As you can see, we spent $75 last year out of the $4,000. So want to keep about $4,000 in there, especially with IT. You really don't know what's going to happen throughout the year. You can plan for things, but things kind of happen on their own. Under 52,430, which is repair and maintenance, $60,000. So if you see last year we budgeted $58,000, spent almost $80,000. So $60,000 is in the budget for this year. That's for servers, computers, phones, replacement hardware, network switches, routers, and firewalls. So it seems like every few years, we're putting more money into switches and routers and replacing a lot of the hardware and servers. We've been consolidating servers for a number of years here, so. The 52530, which is the telephone, $10,000. So it's the landline telephone, but also the modem, cell service, and SIM cards. $52,616, which is the minor equipment replacement, chemicals, other operation maintenance expenses. You see that we budgeted $15,000 last year, spent almost $3,000 of that. I have $10,000 budgeted for this year. That's for hard drives, keyboards, backup batteries, mice, and monitors, TVs, things of that nature. And then finally, 52,617. That is the line just below that. Budgeted $15,000 last year, spent just over $8,600. We have $30,000 budgeted this year, so that'll be for consulting services, support contacts, large system repairs beyond the scope of what Swisscom IT can do. Yes.
Todd presented this budget on 2/18,
Oh,
and the 52335, the 4,000,
Yes.
I know he had a question mark at that point, and then we still have a question mark because they only told you equipment. So we're not sure still what that line is. And then when Todd presented it, the 52617 was a software renewal, but now it's a large system repair, or is that the same thing?
The 617?
The 52617, yeah, he said software renewal. And then the equipments and furnishings at 60,000 is for a phone system because our phones are gonna be obsolete in 2027. And I was trying to Google phone systems, and I wondered if we would switch to I think it's called a VoIP.
Voice over internet.
We already are.
Look at you, technologically savvy.
I just had, it's the one thing I knew, so I wanted to say it, and now you'll think I actually know about it.
I'd like Lisa to come to the mic and tell us all about this. Okay, back to you, Mr. Shreve.
So our current system is a voice over internet protocol system.
Okay.
So what happens is when you call a city building, the main line, that's when you get the attendant. So
Okay.
press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for that.
Okay.
That then uses the internet, the network to send it to the right desk and the right phone. So it's already.
So we're already there. Okay.
The one thing that we did discuss with Chad was there is also a cloud, it's essentially a cloud-based phone system. So instead of having on-premise equipment, so we currently have on-premise equipment, it would basically be a phone that plugs into the internet and then is controlled by a program that resides on the internet. The problem with that is if your internet goes down, your entire phone system goes down. At least with an on-premise system, if the internet goes down, I can still call the mayor, I can call the water department, because we're hardwired into a phone system. So you can internally, you can still call and make phone calls, but you can't, you wouldn't get the internet attendant to direct the phone calls, essentially.
So that would be a problem for like me as a resident calling in, but technically you could call the water department through per se a
Yes,
cell
and
phone?
I believe as long as there is a hard, and I'm not, again, I took telecommunications back when I was in high school, but so much of it is, I don't remember 100%. But if I have a phone line, from what I remember from class, if I have a phone that is hardwired into the wall, that can still work with the internet down. So they could call into one phone and hit one phone and still be able to communicate with us. So a resident could still, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to be directed to a certain desk. It would be that one line would work.
So we have somebody here who has lots of knowledge because they might have worked in this department before. I'm not sure if they want to speak on it, but did we do the cloud before and it didn't work out too well?
No, we looked at it when I worked here as well, and it's the same reason.
Because
Well,
it would go
actually,
down, it would take it all
At the time,
down.
it was that, and also the amount of bandwidth you would need for the number of calls. So like, we would
Okay.
have had to upgrade our internet service to support the number of calls.
So it was probably gonna make it more expensive
It was
then.
gonna be more expensive.
Okay.
And your phones will stay up. If you lose internet, you just won't be able to call the water department or like our off-site.
Okay.
Because like the phone service from like the actual phone lines, there's a bundle of phone lines, like those almost never go down.
Okay.
And you have what's called a trunk. So even if one or two or a dozen went down, you would still, so the system you have is very resilient to
Okay.
failure.
So we'll put the 60,000 in the equipment and furnishings towards the new phone system because we have to have that all upgraded by 2027.
So, yes, that's what, that we would be looking at using that as a portion to.
And then probably next year we'll see this amount again.
Yes,
Okay,
that's the one.
okay.
I wish I had hard numbers to put in front of you. I know Chad was working to try to get me some actual hard numbers, but they're struggling too with all of the tariffs that are being put in place and getting quotes that'll last and trying to explain to somebody, oh, we're discussing it, but we're not sure when we're gonna do it. So it's hard to get a hard number put on stuff right now because nobody really knows in 3 months where prices of things are gonna be.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Question on the phones. The courts, I believe, have a grant for cabling. Would that fall into the phone line?
Who has a grant?
The courts?
Oh.
He spoke on, he had money set aside from a grant or something for some kind of cabling, as long as it was for the Justice Center.
So I'm not sure if that cabling would be used specifically
It
for the.
was some type of fund or something out of those.
That was a $500,000 grant that was received several years ago from the state of Ohio. And that has to be used towards a jail project type thing. So I would doubt that it would be able to be used for cabling because that has to be used more specifically for a jail project, whereas this is going to be phones throughout the whole city. So we could get these and would have to pay that back.
Because if we're splitting, and this is gonna be Justice Center, you know, I'm just thinking out loud, if a portion of what's set aside for the jail project can cover this building, we know we're gonna do it down there when you remodel. I mean, I just heard him say that he had special funds or something for cabling for the Justice Center.
I'm not sure if it's, we'd have to read through the specifics of the
Oh,
grant
absolutely.
agreement.
I remember hearing it, that's why I brought it up.
I do have a note on here from when Todd was talking about this, right under where they'll be obsolete in 2027. It says that cost will be split between other departments for the phones. So, did we say what other departments?
Well, it would be as allowable, water, sewer, other funds that would help pay for that.
Okay.
If we go back up to the line item 52430, repair and maintenance, do you know why they went over so much last year?
I do not.
When it comes to repair and maintenance and just equipment in general, and this may be a very silly question, but if we're spending thousands of dollars a year on new computers, for example, are we purchasing equipment with a warranty? Because I feel like that might save us some money if something were to happen, the following year. That way we're not just buying computers left and right.
Yeah, I don't know if individual computers come with a warranty, but some IT equipment does. I don't believe that they're very long warranties, but, investing in the firewalls and the switches has been a big priority.
Because I know some, like, printers will give you maybe a 2-year warranty or something like that. I just thought it might be worth mentioning.
Your question made me think of something. A lot of the other budgets had computers in them, and then this budget has computers. So is this like an entire department of people that are using multiple computers?
I'm not sure how many computers are in the IT department itself. And I'm not sure of their useful life of when they were purchased off the top of my head or anything like that. So I can't answer if the computers that have been listed here are specifically for IT or if it's a portion of other computers are coming out of this budget and shared cost. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Mayor, just for clarification, Councilwoman Gerhardt's question, just a prime example of that whole thing working. We had an iPad that was broken. Looking at our budget numbers, it never came out of ours. It ended up coming out of that IT. It was like a repair thing for iPad, but they used it out of theirs to repair
It was
the
one of
equipment.
council's iPads?
Correct. And it was used to repair, like other departments.
I mean, you could just say my name.
I wasn't. Nobody was looking at down like our budget where it was coming
Did you
from.
feel
I
all
ended
the
up finding
eyeballs?
out that it was the equipment, the stuff that was breaking. They have an allowance to be able to for emergencies because they are handling the entire city's IT. So.
Gotcha.
You drop one iPad, don't stop here.
You're putting us over budget
really
there,
good.
Mr. Heidick.
Drop brand new.
Any other questions? Yes.
I know Mr. Easterling had kind of gone in with, phones, curiosity if there were any that we had found had been, obsolete or we're not using anymore, we could take off the list, or he looked at copiers and stuff. Another pretty consistent line item that I did not add up through the whole budget was things such as office supplies. Is that something that we are contracted with a company to get a best discount? And then to add to that question, do we have like a buyer, a procurement person who's watching prices and putting all the orders through, or just every department's a free-for-all?
I wouldn't call it a free-for-all, but each department's in charge of their own office supplies.
Okay.
And kind of order as
So
needed.
you might get it from Staples, and that department might get it from Office Depot, and that department might get it from Amazon?
There's a few commercial suppliers that we work with. I would love to have a procurement office that specializes in that. I don't know if the city's big enough for that, but, I've worked in other areas where you have that, and sometimes it helps with cutting costs, sometimes it doesn't.
Usually bulk like a bigger discount, because you're buying in a higher volume. That's what I've done in other companies, so that's why I was curious. And just putting it out there, during my retirement, I love to shop, so maybe I can come volunteer my time in procurement.
Volunteer is the best price. So.
Add to cart, I'm excellent at it, okay.
Anything else?
It's not a question, but I think it was in court special projects, dash buildings is what I think he spoke on.
So the 450,000?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. What usually goes to the general fund is in court special building fund for cabling. Okay, that makes sense. So could I address another issue with the budget?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of emails floating around concerning Inside Advisory Group and the planning department. So I just want to address some of this. I appreciate your questions, Councilwoman Gerhardt. So I'm hearing a lot of rumors, a lot of emails floating around. I have a lot of information that I don't have copies of, things that Insight has put together, and that's why I've been trying to schedule meetings with council members, because I don't have copies of this, so I can't, freely give it out. But some other, we have all the data, we have all the records, we can get you all that information. Some of it is not for public consumption. If you have Company A that came to us for incentives and for help, and their competitor, Company B, finds out about that, is there an advantage or disadvantage there that they don't want public? I'm hoping that there's some, based on the rumors I'm hearing, I'm hoping that what I'm hearing does not happen and there's some compromise. We are fine giving updates on a periodic basis, monthly, quarterly, what have you. We are fine with, as long as it's okay with the business, of taking council members to BRE meetings. I think we've got a great team here with Insight and the knowledge and experience that they bring, with Retzel and the knowledge and experience they bring. And then we work collectively with Main Street, with the Barberton Community Foundation, with BCDC, our partners at the county, our partners at the Greater Akron Chamber of Commerce, those at the state level, Team NEO, Jobs Ohio, those at the federal level. So I feel that I hope that there's some compromise. The plan for the planning department is to let the new director build her team, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and Insight helps with the economic development BRE portion. I do have a copy of their contract, so I can share that with you and what their kind of guidelines are. In terms of the planning department, getting back to that, the planning director has one clerk, has filled another position recently, so it needs to train that staff member. They're currently doing interviews for another position right now, so no matter what their experience is, there's still some onboarding that has to happen and get them acclimated to the job and how the city functions and all that. We would love to get an assistant planning director. Having 3 new or newer employees on the director's plate, in addition to everything else that they have to do, I don't think is fair. I never want to set up employees to fail. I think that even if you get that assistant planning director's position filled, you're still a year out on getting acclimated with everything, getting out in the community, building that trust with the businesses that we already have, and working to build that relationship. I have a lot of comments that I wanted to make. I think that there's some historic things that I'd like to say. In terms of, question was brought up, we need to be proactive in helping businesses grow and help our local economy, and we are, and I totally agree. We're always looking at how do we make things better, how do we change things up, how do we address the needs of our existing businesses and those that are looking to come to Barberton. The economic climate is changing rapidly, right? And so we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs and that we're moving forward and we're on the cusp of doing everything that we need. There is a question here on why don't we have a strategic plan, which is different than a master plan. So the master plan is kind of governed by the Planning Commission. I'm very impatient. I want to get this stuff done as well. The first step was to do the development code, because we can use that now. The master plan is more of a guideline. It's not a Bible, it's a guideline of forecasting into the future. But again, things are changing so rapidly, it's very difficult to put that to paper. I will say one of the reasons why we've gone 9 years without addressing some of those things is mostly financial. So when I came into office, we were coming out of the Great Recession, which according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities covers 2007 to 2017. And on top of that, a housing bust. When I came into office, employees had given back part of their salary. They didn't give them back money. So we were not in a good place financially. We had to right that ship. It's not the time to spend $100,000 plus on a master plan. We had to get in touch with our business community. As far as I know, previous administrations did not do business visits. So that was one of the first things I put together, but soon realized that this is a specialty, and there's people out there, experts, that know how to do business visits, what questions to ask, what are relevant questions, what are programs at the county, state, or federal level that can address some of the needs of our business community. And at that time, the priority was to demo as many tax delinquent, blighted structures that were stealing value from taxpayer properties. And we got over 200 and probably 250 in a number of years of tax delinquent and blighted structures torn down. Money from the state, from the foundation, the county, and internal money. So it took many years to right the ship. Still dealing with the effects of the Great Recession, because if you do any research, cities are the last ones to fully recoup from things like the recession, any national type issue. Then comes the opiate epidemic. Then comes logistical issues. I know that one of the things we talk about with our businesses, especially some of these machine shops, what industries are you tied to? And finding out that many of them are tied in one way or the other to the automotive industry. When there was a breakdown on the automotive side, it really hurt our businesses in town. So finding out, building that relationship, finding out what industries they work with, where do their raw materials come from, who are their suppliers, what's that supply chain look like, who are some of their vendors, and how can we help with that. Then on top of that, we start hearing rumors of B&W leaving, despite the fact that their CEO at the time told me that there would be no job loss and they weren't moving anywhere. And I hesitate to say a lot about any publicly traded company in town because I don't want the SEC on me, and I don't know what would trigger that, and I don't want to find out. So if it's a publicly traded company, a lot of information we have to keep close to the chest there. We were visiting businesses during this whole time, trying to understand the complexities of business visits. We soon realized that we needed some outside help. We did an RFQ, request for qualifications, and settled on Insight Advisory Group. Now, as was mentioned the other week, some of the employees for Insight have changed back in 2023, but we've worked with them over the years. We've put things together. We went down to DC. They had a Select USA conference where investors come from other countries, and they kind of walk around, and we're at a table, come to the city of Barberton in Ohio. And so we put this together for them, kind of a community profile. And so they shop around. There's thousands of people there. So we want to market Barberton. We were able to, through Insight, go down to Tampa, Florida, and present at a national conference for economic development. So we were on center stage there giving a presentation to thousands of people on Barberton, Ohio, and the opportunities that lie here. Again, the economy is changing so quickly. Putting together a strategic plan on economic development is different than putting together a master plan or putting together even a strategic plan on how to attack something. So we want to work on that. We want to put that together. We want to continue our business visits. We have no problem sharing the information of the businesses that we meet with or what industry they're tied to. Having you go to business visits with us, again, as long as the business is okay with it. I did share a company that Insight was able to get to Barberton. They weren't even looking at Barberton because it was kind of outside of their area. They moved up here, no tax incentives of any kind. Moved into a vacant building. It was perfect for them, met their needs, wasn't too far out of their boundary. 114 employees, publicly traded company. Their tax revenue to the city more than pays for Insight and what we pay them. And we get 3 people for $50,000. Some council members have said, well, I wish they worked more than 25 hours. Well, that's what's in the contract. You can always up the contract. And we can have those conversations depending on the needs. It was brought up, well, we want a list of companies and jobs retained, jobs created. So I have that here. Some of this information may seem like it's coming at the 11th hour. There's been so many emails going around that it's drop everything to address this email. We got to pull facts and figures for this email tied to the budget. And then you get back to this, and then it's, well, we got to go over here because another email from another council member came in and they want to know about this. Obviously, there was a timeline to pass the budget. We wanted to get as many facts as possible. And again, I was trying to set up meetings with council members to discuss this. A hotel. That came through on the email. Yes, we've been discussing a hotel for a number of years. We've done some studies with a group out of Chicago on, they were pulling information. what businesses have travelers? How often do they travel? Where do they stay? How long are they staying? What other events are going on? So whether it's LeBron James used to have a basketball camp at Akron U, which brought thousands and thousands of people. Obviously, that's not there now. But you had the Republican National Committee up in Cleveland, and they were staying in hotels even into Canton. So they look at more regional things as well, and how often do those things happen, right? Is anyone staying down here, coming in from out of town, staying in this area to go to a Cleveland Browns game or a Cavs game or something like that? So they look at all that. We've had very detailed conversations with a hotel chain, and we continue to have those discussions. Their financing model is a little different than most. And more recently, over the last 6 months, I've met with another individual who is working with a chain of chain of hotels that is interested in coming to Barberton. So we would have to do another study. I think it's something that's viable. I think that we can kind of pull that off. But hotels are tough. They need to have an occupancy rate. And some hotels have told us, if we don't meet that occupancy rate, can the city pay to get us to that rate? We can't do that. We've looked at, there's a newer one down in Orville. They took and retrofitted a building up in Lorraine. We went and looked at that one and met with the proprietors of those as well. So yes, that is still on the list. Hotels are just tough, but we're actively talking to two interested parties about that. My fear is taking attention away from business visits, because we have businesses that we are actively engaged with who are talking about expanding. If that is cut off, they will probably go somewhere else, pull their existing jobs and move out of town. And one of them is looking at adding 115 jobs. If you don't have the revenue coming in into the income tax fund from jobs, then you don't have that money going to the general fund. So you're not paving as many roads, you're not buying police cars, you're not upgrading parks, you're not doing anything that comes out of the general fund. And you could still have vacant buildings laying around not being utilized. Again, in terms of accountability and transparency, I said we'll provide council with whatever information you want as available. We don't want to void any trust with the business community that we meet with. So I'm asking for some compromise here. Have no problem with meeting with people, with council members, with going over the contract or going over what they've put together. Just want to make sure that if we say something is not for public consumption, that it's kept. And that respect is there. Are there any questions? Yes.
That book that you were holding up, how long ago did they make that?
It's been a number of years.
Okay.
So we have decided not to go back to DC for the Select USA conference. Looking at what we could provide and what others were providing, we wanted to make sure we had better footing, so we actually have all the T's crossed and I's dotted before we go down there.
So my question was, has that PDF walked away that you can't send that to us? I mean, you said you only have like this copy,
Yeah.
but you had a PDF at one time to
I did not have a PDF. They printed it, Insight created it with our help, printed it, and then, so I don't have a PDF of it.
Do you have the
So
ability
Insight
to
does.
scan it in and email it out?
I'll have to take it off of this. I'm not sure. If I take it off, I don't know if I can get it back on, but yeah.
Okay.
But there's, let me find some of these things here. Opportunity zones. This was, I think this was installed a few years ago for the federal level. They put together a map and explanation, a one-pager on opportunity zones. So Barberton has 2 of them. Helped us put together a one-sheeter on PACE financing, which is, many businesses have used that. Expansions, offer letters. Here's one for a local business. You won't see Insight's name on some of this stuff because they represent the city. So if you see the city of Barberton, they have had a piece of that, putting that together. So here's one that's got Jobs Ohio Team Neil about Hannah Card roller coatings. And we worked with them very closely on expansion and getting them some dollars from the state level. So love the opportunity to sit down and talk about some of the profiles and some of the work that they've done, and, you know, some of the goals that we have internally for them. But in some cases, we have to be generic with the information, because we have businesses, I'll call them clients, who we are actively engaged with, who are deciding to stay here and build, or expand, or go somewhere else. The other thing that they bring to the table is they have estimators. So, had a company last Thursday, I put this in an email, they're looking at piecemealing some expansion to their existing building. And they've got a rough cost for that. We threw out the idea of, why don't you just build brand new? Then you get exactly what you want, it's not piecemealed. So how much square footage do you need for office? How much square footage do you need for production and warehousing? And how many trucks do you get? And do you need a loading dock? And employee parking and X, Y, and Z. And they said, well, can you run the cost on that? Because if we reach out to a developer or a builder, they're going to want some type of payment for this. Insight has estimators. They can get that information. Obviously, you got to go get your own estimate from your builder, but you're going to be in the ballpark of this, right? If we don't have that, because we don't have that software, we don't have that expertise inside, do we just tell the business, good luck? I don't know what to tell you. I'd rather not miss out on business opportunities. Took a call the other week from a developer / site selector out of Alabama that we've talked to before, who owns some property here, about the Newell Street site. Gave me some rough estimates. And so we deal with, so I don't even know what industry this company is, but it's a minimum of 80 jobs, maximum of 275. Like, that's both ends of the spectrum there, right? They need the full 32, 36 acres over at Newell Street. They've already talked to JLL, who is representing the foundation, who is marketing the property. They wanted to know what city incentives we could do, because this company is also looking in Cleveland. I don't know what incentives Cleveland's giving, but I told them, hey, you've met with my team, which includes me, the planning director, the building CBO, Insight, Retzel. You've got this team. If you go to Cleveland, you're going to be a small fish in a big pond. I don't think you're going to get that same attention with those department heads and directors and consultants. Here, you kind of be the big fish in a small pond. So we're doing everything we can. I just don't want any of these deals to go down the drain because our legs were cut from underneath us. So, yes.
I have some responses and some questions with what you had just talked about. I guess first the statement, you talked about all the different partners. I don't foresee our partners going away by shifting away from hiring Insight as a consulting group. So I'm pretty confident we would still have all of our partners. Currently, we're pulling our planning director away from her duties, which is including onboarding all these people, because of putting her into the involvement of economic development more than she needs to be. I think a bigger question that's not part of this is how our planning department went down to one person. Have we figured out what's causing the rapid overturn in that department? Because I don't know, we don't feel like we keep Councilman Heidick, how long do we keep a planning director in Barberton?
I've been here now for three. Former director Stefan resigned before I was sworn in.
So yeah, I can give you the history on that. When I started, the first one went to another city to make more money. The second one retired. The third one lived in Cleveland as a young family, found a better paying job up there, closer to home. The next one, family all lives in the hometown he grew up in. The position just opened up. He applied, just recently got married, moved back to the hometown. Parents are alive, grandparents. Wants to start a family in the town that everyone still lives in, his whole family.
Why did the most recent person in the planning department leave?
It's my understanding that he's been looking for some opportunities since day one.
I still think this could be addressed because I think there's more to it. Next, you talked about being proactive, but we lack the strategic plan, a master plan. It's not in the budget for a master plan. I know you're saying it's not the Bible, but it's still, we have all these players at all these tables, and we can't see a plan anywhere. We have to have a plan at some point that's not a decade outdated. With Insight being on board for 9 years, in no time was an economic plan, development plan, brought up or asked for prior to the 3 weeks before we need to pass a budget. I don't believe that that's based on the Great Recession and the opioids and the logisticals, and I just don't think that they did a good job for your city, Mayor, and I'm sorry to say that. They should have had a plan. Did we ask the BCDC or the foundation for funds to do an economic development plan to help our city, since they both have large stakes in economic development?
So BCDC does not grant funds for that purpose.
How about the foundation?
So we've talked to them, and so we're having those discussions.
Prior to this year?
We have had some discussions with previous employees there on putting something together. They're not there anymore. And
It just is disappointing that here we are, you said the 11th hour. The 11th hour was 2016, 17, 18, 19. We're not in the 11th hour right now.
Well, it's very easy to look back and say coulda, woulda, shoulda. But when you're in the mix of things and an opiate epidemic is hitting your community and your region hard, and when the Great Recession and with the COVID and logistical issues and companies are saying, I can't get my raw materials, how are you going to help me, city? So we're reaching out to them, finding out, getting all that dashboard information on who the business is there a parent company, what do they produce, who are their vendors, who are their suppliers, how are they getting shipments in, what's their workforce development needs. There's a litany of questions that we had to answer because there was nothing before my administration came on that I'm aware of. That takes time. It takes time to build trust. There's a lot of businesses that we would call up and they would say, I don't know why you want to meet with me. City did me wrong 20 years ago. And we're like, okay, well, that's in the past, not sure what happened. We want to start fresh. And there's a lot of businesses, small machine shops in town where the CEO, the owner, is on the shop floor. And their response is, I'll call you if I need you. I don't have time to take 15 minutes to meet with you. So getting your foot in the door takes a lot of time at times. So under their contract, and I have copies here of kind of what we have outlined that they should do. We've looked at the economic strategic plan, but you may say, well, 9 years, that's a long time. There's a lot going on and a lot of changes that we had to address. And just building that rapport with the businesses takes a long time. It really does. It's easy to sit back and say, well, it should have been done before. And there's just a lot that has gone in. And I'd love to sit down and talk to you more about this.
But I mean, right now is I'm trying to be very polite. Please do not take me as rude. Now's the time because I want it out of the budget tonight. So we have to talk about it right now.
Right, no, and that's why I brought this up.
So-
This will cripple our economic development efforts.
I don't believe it would cripple it because you already have a large role in the economic development and you can help bridge it while they bring on an economic development
Assuming I don't
manager.
get pulled in 15 other directions.
Okay, we could probably lean into Main Street or the foundation or the BCDC to help in the meantime since they are all major players at this table.
At this table.
The economic development table.
Does not guarantee that they have the connections that Insight does or the expertise that they have.
We have to take a chance at some point because for 9 years, was anybody impressed with the presentations that they gave?
Well, and
The
let's address
answers that lacked all kinds of detail, and it's not a secret who our biggest companies are. That's on Google. That's
Right.
not
Well, and so
secretive.
They came here without knowing what questions were going to be asked. If you're looking through the lens of an economic developer, they look at businesses different ways. When you say, what are the largest businesses in town? They're thinking, are they the businesses we deal with? Because we don't work with the schools because they have their own program and they're very niche, right? They're looking for mostly educators. Obviously, there's other positions there. The hospital, I work with them directly, but we don't do business visits there because, again, very specific niche of healthcare workers. And so they've got a pipeline for doctors and nurses and things of that nature. Do you look at a business as the number of employees is the the factor to have is a big business or amount of payroll. You can have a lot of employees, but you don't pay the best, so you're not up there on the payroll side. Or you have a few number of employees, but the payroll is very high. So when you ask what's the biggest companies in town, they're looking at through those lenses. Well, which one are you talking about?
They didn't ask any of those questions that night, though.
Well, and you know, they were here last week and said, yeah, they didn't answer things the right way.
Okay, well, that's fair. They didn't. What was the result of going to Florida and presenting Barberton to Florida? What came of that?
So we had ongoing discussions with a lot of companies, and then things happened nationally that people pull back. We did talk to some hotel chains that were down in that area.
Okay. Again, I'm firm in believing that we need our own economic development manager. I genuinely appreciate your efforts, Mayor. I appreciate that you're certified in economic development, that you're facilitating the meetings for all the various organizations that contribute to the economic development of Barberton. But we need a designated leader. We don't have a plan, we don't have a coach. I don't watch that much football, but those are very important things that they seem to use every Sunday. I believe that it would just be the best if, as a city, so the council and the administration, we focus on the things that are going to attract businesses to our town. Keeping up with the infrastructure, doing more road improvements so that our town looks better when a business is considering coming here. Making sure our buildings are inspected. Buildings downtown right now have skylights without glass in them because the roof's caved in because we weren't inspecting them. We had to, last I read some of the stuff from the foundation last year, in order to get their grant, you needed to go get your occupancy permit. Why is the foundation making sure we have permits in place? That's not on them.
It's not on them. It's guaranteeing that before they get the grant that they have.
But we failed. We didn't have occupancy permits. We weren't doing inspections. Wadsworth has a Main Street downtown. Wadsworth has an economic development director. They revitalized it and brought in 8 new businesses in '23. Other towns have this and we don't. Medina, 25% increase in occupied downtown storefronts. Everybody wants to be in Medina when you talk about the downtown area. So we need to be holding our landlords and property owners responsible for the buildings being maintained and for their safety. I think we need this economic development manager. They need to report to the planning commission. We take the $50,000 and then we need to find, because you're right, $50,000 isn't going to pay for somebody even with 2 to 3 years experience. But I believe we could reach out to see if there's anything left in the general fund or some of the stuff that we're pulling. Talk to the foundation for help. Are there any grants that could help us? Then we need to create some accountability, clear performance metrics, measurable metrics, and what we expect out of this investment. And it's done right off the riff. We don't ask for it, or whoever's on council in 9 years doesn't have to ask for it. We design this plan clear right now. The person's with the chamber, they're with the BCDC, they're with the BCF, they're with Main Street, and they're all working together. And just for Barberton, they don't have 4 of their cities that they're out representing. When we're not doing good, they lose sleep like the rest of us do. I want this person to help grow our existing businesses, help meet their needs, help them with anything they need, recruit new businesses to Barberton. I know that was a thing that kept getting mentioned last week. It was all about business retention. There was no mention of how we're bringing in new businesses as a whole. This person can get grants. They need to be good at grant writing. We do not have an inventory of the available properties and land in our city. And I've asked 3 parts of economic development in the city, and we don't have it. That needs to be created. We need to promote for businesses to come to Barberton, and this person needs to report to council regularly, so it's not during a budget talk. I think we're going to get much better results than other cities who might just be using consultants. It will cost us more, but in the long run, it's going to be worth it with our businesses, jobs, the grant money, and bringing in more taxes. the mayor's right. There is a time frame to this. We have to be very realistic and help bridge gaps, while that person's onboarding, while we're finding them, looking for relationship building, for some quick wins, to get them underway and being successful. The cost of using Insight is greater than $50,000 a year because we are pulling whoever our planning director is, and so that's costing money from that. It's costing staff. It's losses in salary. It's losses in productivity, and we need to let planning plan. They're the future. The economic development's right now. That's all. I didn't prepare my talk based on what you said. I was trying to come up with it last night, but I believe that they need to be pulled, and we need our own economic development director.
Well, and you're right, you will pay a lot for an economic development director. It's going to take a long time to put the job description together, to advertise for it, to go through SERB, to point factor it, to hire someone, get them acclimated, and what do you lose in the meantime? Can they do the job? We have either new businesses to town or existing businesses who have expanded 2 this year, 6 last year, 12 and 23, 8 and 22, and in 21, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14. So those are existing businesses that expanded with more jobs or new businesses to town. So I think we're doing pretty good. Can you always do better? Of course. Does Insight wake up every day or thinking about Barberton? Yes. I'm in constant communication with them on weekends and evenings. Hey, have you thought about this or that? Katie Breck from Insight sent over a grant, a link for a grant that might be good for Main Street. Didn't have to do that. She doesn't work for Main Street, but she's a part of the team. She knows that anything good for Main Street is good for Barberton. Might be something the Main Street can make use of, maybe not. We're not sure, but she's doing extra work. I think we sit in a good place. Putting together an economic development strategy is important. We've got like all the pieces and parts, and we've been working to keep businesses open because of workforce development is an issue. We've been working to get new available sites. We do have a list of vacant buildings in town. That's in the planning department. We have a list of vacant sites that we own that we want to market and get out there. We've talked to developers about this. We've got a meeting set up later in April here to talk to a local developer, site selector type. So we're doing everything you're saying. I haven't heard anything from council all year until now, right? And you're saying I'm coming at the 11th hour. I get what you're saying, but the question's kind of at the 11th hour as well. Anything you guys want us to present, let us know, and we'll set up times. You want this done quarterly? We can set that up and make that quarterly. You want water usage or something with utilities? We can do that. You had asked last year about fixing the roads after they've been impacted, right? Whether it's a water main or something else.
Street cutouts?
Street cutouts. So we're getting that to you as often as we can. So we'll get whatever information. When it comes to something like this, we want to make sure that it's we can talk about things and that it's not voiding any trust with the businesses that we've built this trust with.
So I kind of want to address both of you here. I think that you've brought up a lot of really great points and a lot of things that you and I have talked about privately between you and I. I feel like what you are proposing with saying no to Insight for this year, I feel like it's a little bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think you're wrong with some of the things that you've been saying, but to tear something down immediately and say, well, we're going to be fine, I don't think that's true. You know, you brought up 2 other towns, Wadsworth and Medina. I've done some work with the Wadsworth Main Street as well, but mostly Wadsworth and Medina are several tax brackets above Barberton's. So, you know, like those are not apples to apples comparing those 2 things together. You know, we have one woman running that thing, and her plate is full, so much that she has probably 2 or 3 plates. You know, and then saying we need to bring this internally, that is well over a 6-figure job. to put all that onto somebody, and that's an entire department. So, you know, I think that your goals are lofty, and I think that they are good. However, to cut something out of a budget tonight is throwing the baby out the bathwater. This is a conversation that we should have over many, many years. However, I do want to address the mayor. I know you and I have had this, I've tried polite ways to say this to you. We feel like we are constantly held at fingertip length, and we have to speak to a sphinx and ask the question just the right way to get just the right answer. And I think that this is what you're reaping here. You don't let us in. And I understand where you're coming from too, that you can't give away too much, right? I get that. But when we don't feel let in and don't feel part of something, we just sit up here and read papers and, is this good? I don't know. We have to go run here, run there to get the information. This is what happens. You know, we lose trust. There's a smoke screen up, it feels like. So now we're talking about completely throwing a whole baby out with the bathwater that's economic development. So, you know, we really need to fix our communication between all of us. We really do.
I don't disagree with you. And, you know, in the past, and I know people have jobs and are busy and things like that, council members came in more frequently to talk to us. And you have a question, you come in and talk to Mr. Shreve quite often.
I do.
Mr. Griffin comes in quite often. Our doors are open. When I stand up here and say our doors are open, that's true. Come in. Now, if you don't make an appointment and pop in, most likely someone can talk to you, but not all the time. So I've started going out and trying to set up meetings with council members. So if you work, so do I, and I've got a family and all that stuff too. I can meet after hours, right? Whenever it is. If you have questions, email them over. No one on our side is upset with any of the questions that you guys proposed. But when they all start coming in a flurry, we're kind of drop everything that we have to do and start addressing these things. So I don't disagree with you, but it's a two-way street.
Sure.
We feel at times, and I said this before, if we say we want to do project X, Y, and Z, and then we give you everything, it comes off sometimes that it's a lot of BS, right? If we come out and say, here's the skinny, right? This is all, it comes off like we're not giving you enough, we're hiding something. So I'm not sure how much information to give. So in the past, like I said, a lot of council members have come in and talked to us. How do you want us to present it? What do you need? And we'll do that.
Sorry, Mr. Tudeki had his hand up back there.
If I could just have a second, I worked for another community before I came to Barberton, and I sat at economic development meetings behind closed doors with 20-some members that actively met in a similar capacity as what Barberton does now. I've watched that team. It's not a person, it's a team of experts that bring their level, whether it's the planning, it's the engineering, it's the mayor's cabinet, it's economic development. It is a group of people that all bring a piece of expertise that makes economic development strong for a city. So having that experience in coming to Barberton to see how it does efficiently operate, Katie, coincidentally, was a mayor's cabinet member in those closed-door meetings, and she was a rock star then. Watching her operate within the city's cabinet and work through those same meetings that happen now. Now she's a consultant that has backing of expertise behind her with additional members with her. Just saying, knowing how other cities operate, watching the expertise of what we're paying $50,000, I would challenge anybody to find somebody like Katie for 2 or 3 times that money, let alone the team of people with her, supporting her, that we're lucky to have that group here in town. And I just want to say, I think it would be a misstep not to continue the efforts that they bring to the table every day, every week, continually for town. So I just want to bring that perspective to the table.
Councilperson Gerard, I don't disagree with you that communication, what I'm going to say, communication got a lot better on our side. You come into this position, you assume things have been done the right way, right, for the right reason. We have had better communication internally. We have had for a number of years joint meetings with the law department, the fire department, the police department, building, planning, and service to talk about problem areas and doing fire inspections and making sure that everything is streamlined. So when we want to build our downtown and we want visitors to come in here and shop, it's got to be in a safe environment. I totally agree with you. And so we did a sweep about 3 years ago. Not a popular thing. Did a sweep of all the downtown buildings. We have a number of them in court. A number of them we're still working with. Put programs together to help the businesses as well. So it's happening. Nothing happens overnight, but it's happening and it's getting stronger every day. You have a question, sir?
I won't say a question. I guess it's more of a comment. I appreciate you and Mr. Teodecki's comments about Insight. I was kind of embarrassed for Insight the first time they came in here when they can't answer that top three question. I actually had somebody approach me on the street and say, "How can that company not know who the top 3 employees are?" They named them off. The other thing that gets me is the Worcester Road West visits prior to the construction, or lack thereof, I should say. I talked to a lot of the businesses on that route. A lot of them were not happy with Insight. If we're paying to have a company deliver some letters concerning construction, you just don't leave them on someone's step. You don't leave. I talked to one business, and they actually talked to the Insight person, and he couldn't answer any questions whatsoever that they had for him. None. Never even offered to say, "Hey, I'll write down your questions, and I'll have somebody contact you." Me personally, I think Insight needs to go bye-bye. I've been here in the city for 32 years, and over the last 10 to 15 years, I think our city has just declined. Not only property maintenance, which you and I have discussed, but nobody wants to come here. No businesses want to come here. And that's concerning. And I've talked to some business owners outside the city, and it's like, "Hey, come to Barberton." No. That's concerning to me. I want somebody that is truly engaged in our city, that champions our city, we have 110% of their attention on our city, and our city alone, not 3 or 4 other communities, but ours. I just think having one person solely for our city is what we need. That's the only way I think we're going to change things around.
Yeah, I disagree with you on some of your comments. Just cut a ribbon for a brand-new company, W Construction, that was just going to move up here and add on later, sometime later, decided to add on right away. And they're growing like gangbusters. Already purchased another property around the corner from them to add on more.
But that's one company.
And right across the street is Barberton Tree. 95 employees moved back to Barberton. We worked with them on that. Howmet did an expansion with jobs. You were at that one as well. Some smaller businesses here. Copart came in the other year, right there on Norton Avenue, new to Barberton. ABC Supply Company moved in on South Van Buren, occupied a vacant building, more jobs there. RSS Macklin moved in downtown. Got some great growth potential there. Well-Now up on the east side, another healthcare organization. Eurofins over off of Foundation Place, off of South Van Buren. R.D. Abbott expanded from around 25,000 square feet to about 150,000 square feet. Occupy a vacant building, continuing their growth model. And we're working with ARDL. I can keep going on and on.
I don't think Well-Now lasted
They're still
a
open.
year. Hometown something now, yeah. No
And
longer Well-Now.
only one of those companies you mentioned, did you say that Insight was part of that? So
Rebranded.
it's great that they're coming, but I don't think that's because of work that Insight's doing. And just to go to some of your points, Mrs. Beck, I have other cities. I don't know what tax bracket Norwalk, Ohio, or Tiffin, Ohio, or Bedford, Virginia, or Mount Vernon, Illinois are in, but, we can get an economic development director or manager with 2 to 3 years experience. I'm not asking for the top of the line and we're over 100K with them right off the bat. They could either grow as our city grows so that it would justify the expense.
But you're also expecting them to be LeBron James with 2 years' experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
No, but the bathwater you're talking about has lots of babies swimming in it. We have lots of economic development in our town without a leader.
I think this is a longer conversation than cutting off Insight right this moment, is what I'm trying to say to you. I think it's a conversation worth having.
I just think that they would have shown us more in 9 years, and I think it's time. But I appreciate that. I do think it's something that needed to have been talked about for years now.
Yeah, I would love to see a department here that's economic development, but I don't think we can afford that. I don't think we can afford the person. You're talking about turnover, my God, the revolving door. With the pressure that would be put on them with 2 years' experience, for the measly dollars we could pay them, I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, so is spending $50,000 on a company that we're not getting results from. Like, then we can agree that both options aren't the best, but I think now's the time to try a new option.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you with that.
Yeah.
To your point, Counselor Beck, and I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent here, but under your scenario, if one consulting group has done so much and is just so worth it, then why don't we pay them $200,000 a year and axe our entire planning department? No, in a scenario like you're proposing, if they're doing that great things and our department's lagging.
I didn't say they
But
were.
what I'm saying is, if a consulting group is going to be able to do the job better than our own department because we have so much turnover, why wouldn't we invest in our department before we invest in the outside consultants?
I'm not suggesting that we don't.
I'm just throwing a zero
suggesting that we
scenario
talk
out there.
about this longer than over a month and saying, well, let's just get rid of them. So to say axe a whole department and pay these people more that's ridiculous. I think these are longer conversations that we need to have, not in council. I think we need to sit down with each other in people's offices and talk about this. That's what I'm saying. I
We
think
can invest in our own
this is
people.
one extreme to another, which is just outrageous, so.
Well, the other thing, I want to make sure that any new employees, new positions that we create and employees is sustainable. The business model of a city on income taxes is the worst business model ever, right? So you're always going to have those highs and those lows. Ask anyone that has worked for a city for a long period of time. At some point, we're going to have bad financial times. It's going to happen. There's something that's going to happen locally, regionally, nationally, mostly nationally. We want to make sure that positions are sustainable. If you have a consultant, it's easy to sever ties. You save that money, right? There's a 30, 60-day out, right? There's ways of doing this. They do wake up every day thinking about how to make Barberton better. I agree. Cutting off at the knees is not the best way to do it because we're going to lose a lot of months of productivity and hopefully not, but relationships with these businesses. So I fear that this is going to cripple our economic development efforts, and it's not going to turn out good in the short term or long term. And I was just asking for some compromise. Whatever you want, we can put together and have those meetings, do a quarterly update to council, whether it's economic development or anything else.
Can Insight do a 6-month contract
I'd have to talk to them about that.
so we can phase them out?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they'd want to go in knowing that. I can't speak for them. I don't know.
Just cut.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, I think we have a city council, and I don't know about past city councils, but we have a city council that is very, very connected to this city and very wanting to be involved in, not necessarily the day-to-day, we don't want to be making decisions in Jeremy's department or Lisa's department, but just, it's important for us to be involved. So we know when we're making our decisions that we are making the best decisions possible. So it's with Insight and with economic development discussions, we understand there's that privacy. possibly the businesses would be willing to let you talk to us about their names in an executive session. So they know that their information is only going this far. It's not on public record. Even if not names, it's not that we want to know the nitty-gritty of everything. It's that we want to know, so when we're making decisions about budgets and legislation, that we know we've got all the information in front of us to be able to make the best decision possible. And a lot of times, through no fault of your own, we don't feel like that. And, like with Insight, reading over their answers, I had great concerns because a lot of their answers were just very vague. And, and I know everybody keeps going back to the question about, the top 3 businesses. And, and it's like, okay, well, they can look at it 3 different ways. Well, they had an opportunity to say, well, which way do you mean? We can look at it this way, or this way. And that would have immediately cleared up the situation. I mean, like I said in my letter to you today, my, daughter who graduated in 2017 knew the answer right off the top of her head. I think, I think it feels a lot to us, the vagueness. And once again, it comes down to communication. And if companies don't want us knowing their name or how many employees they have or whatever they want to keep private, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But they also need to know that there's a city council sitting in here right now that gives a damn about this city, and we want to help every business and every person in this city. And we can only do that when we have as much information as we possibly can have, because we take our job seriously.
I don't disagree with you, and I take my job seriously too.
Yeah.
So tell me how to best communicate with you and when. Let's set up times, let us know, and we will have those meetings.
Yeah, I think talking to businesses, and it's like, when we ask, it's like you just went off a whole list of new businesses in town. And I'm sitting here thinking, didn't hear about that one, didn't hear about that one, didn't hear about that one. If a new business is, they're signing contracts and they're getting in a building, and it's okay for you, because I know there's confidentiality clauses and everything. But as soon as you're allowed to talk about it publicly, I would love to see an email shot out to all of us saying, hey, great news, council. We've been working with this business, and now it can go public that they're moving in here, and we're going to be having a grand opening soon. So as soon as you are able, we know. Because then that shows us, okay, this business opened, and we're not hearing a whole list at one time.
Right.
We're seeing the continued progress.
And I can send this list out. We have another list where we took the names off, gave them, fake project names, if they're open, closed, what the status is, jobs retained, jobs created. So, the vast majority of the businesses that I read off, Insight did have a hand in. And then, this is from Insight as well. So with these businesses, I forget how many there are here, 273 jobs retained and 218 created. And these are either ongoing currently or are, most of them are still open or completely closed, meaning that they're already done and moved on. But Topcraft for the other year, huge expansion. They do a great job, and got a great rapport with them, and Insight was very involved in that one. And they actually helped them. They had a question with some electrical needs, and they were able to make contact right away, which sped up their processes. I gave an example of another company that reached out to Insight several times over the last few months. That was their first point of contact, and they got the answers and solution that they needed right away.
Mayor, I'm so sorry to cut you
I
off,
understand.
but can we please take a quick break? I've got several eyeballs looking at me. We just need to take a few minutes. We can absolutely continue this discussion after. but if we could just take a few minutes. Thank you.
About 10, and when we adjourn.
Did you say
let's go
3
straight to
minutes?
Legislative.
No, I got stuff I gotta do in our break, so
ordinances.
I was hoping that this was gonna be wrapped up so we can take a big break.
I think we'd take hours on this.
You can motion to adjourn.
I still have to go over
She says-
other pending legislation, and I'm afraid this
Well, we can
discussion
take a 3-minute break.
may not be over. Thank you.
back to live.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine.
Anyways, you were saying.
Come on.
He can remember like we can.
There's been obviously a lot said tonight, a lot of comments, a lot of questions. I appreciate the feedback. A lot of information floating back and forth through emails. I think it'll be a detriment to our efforts thus far if the knees are taken out from underneath this program. We have a great team. I can't speak for other communities, but I do know that we get feedback from other communities that our team is very good. And, if you want information, we'll present anything, like I said before, present whatever you want. We'll meet with you, give you the numbers, give you the businesses as best as we can, take you on BREs. We want to have that relationship that is open and free communication. We also have to trust. There's a council member here that I had mentioned something to about the term sheet and said, hey, this is not for public discourse. It was mentioned here in a public meeting, and luckily nobody heard it, right? Or said anything about it. So we have to make sure that we're not voiding any trust, because once you break that trust, you're not getting it back. So unless there's any other questions, I'm done.
One very short one.
Yes.
Well, we hear a lot about job retention. How do you, the company who just ain't making it, can't get to work, can't whatever, how do you retain a job for people who are trying to lower their cost, I guess? How do you help that company retain jobs?
So we ask those questions. How much will you tell us? Because maybe they don't tell us everything. What can we do to help you? Is it finding more employees, better skilled employees? We have a way of doing that. There's some grant programs through the state that'll help you, reimburse you up to a certain dollar amount to hire, because there's a cost just to hire. If you hire 10 people, you may only find 1 or 2 good ones, right? There are new employee training dollars that will reimburse you for training new employees, new hires. So there's avenues on that side. If it's more of like their sales, even though Main Street is focused on downtown, we can reach out to Main Street and say, well, depending on the nature of your business, have you looked at using the internet and sales through the internet, and what's your Google rating and things of that nature? If it's logistical supply chain things, maybe what are you making? What widgets are you making, and what inventory do you need? Maybe the company down the street, we found this out, the company down the street makes the same thing, but this business A didn't know that business B was there. They got that widget, cut down on supply chain costs and transportation costs and all that. So there's a number of factors that we need to be explored. We had a company in town that said, the parent company said, if we don't hire 50 more people, we're packing up and moving down south. And so we worked with them a number of years, really fed that pipeline of new employees, and they said, well, we're shutting down anyways. Luckily, that building is not sitting vacant. It's recently been purchased by another barbering business that is looking to expand. So we're helping them with that. So, yeah, there's a lot of variables, and you're trying to fix everyone or plug the holes. We can't do everything, right? And so, but we can put them in touch with, point them in the right direction, or if people like Insight know those programs inside and out. Have you thought about this to reduce costs, whether it's operational costs, labor costs, things of that nature? So there's a lot of things that we can look at. Anything else?
In regards to Insight, I can totally understand and respect where everyone's coming from. I think the issue is we don't all see real results. Their presentation was embarrassing. However, I also agree that just nixing it right now would not be a good thing. And if we could find a way to perhaps hire somebody for Barberton to focus on economic development while also having Insight here, but we want to see changes. We need some more transparency with them. We want to see results from them, and then maybe next year we'll still keep them around. So I think there may be areas where maybe with parks, you know, when it comes to Waltz, maybe instead of resurfacing the thing, we power wash it and put some lines on it. Maybe we put the van off for a year, something like that. But I think it would be really beneficial to hire somebody. I know Stacy's got a lot on her plate. We just need a go-getter. We need someone who is not gonna need their hand held, you know, to get out there. So I would like to find a compromise to see how we could perhaps do both. And if they're doing their job, they'll be bringing in more business and it will help pay for themselves. So that's just my thought.
Mr. Mayor, I just got one quick analysis of what I'm going to call the Barberton. I think I've been here longer than anybody else in this room. When I got out of high school, you could walk around the corner and get a job. 60s, 70s. Barberton has never recovered. This just didn't happen 10 years ago. We haven't recovered from the 70s. And we're still looking to recover. And I think we're on the right path to do it. And here's another thing. Barberton is not Medina. Barberton is not Wadsworth. Barberton is not Copley. Barberton is Barberton, and that's where it's always been. You know, you got different demographics, money scale, education scales, completely different. And there's more appeal. We're landlocked. They got different, this is completely different. And myself personally, I think that we should, you know, keep insight, don't throw them under the bus. Now, we could do more things to, you know, have meetings with them or talk with them or whatever to get back on the right path. You know, get some kind of, something that's working. But right now is not the time to just cut it off. Because like I said, Barberton has been Barberton, and the job, we haven't recovered from the 70s. And that's the fact. That's all I got to say.
Barberton is in the Rust Belt too.
All right, if there's no other comments regarding the budget, anybody else? Anything from the gallery? All right. Next up for pending, we've got ordinance number 36-2025. This would authorize payment to Retzel in the amount of $21,000 for 2 invoices for legal services rendered and declaring an emergency. Are there any remarks? Then we have ordinance number 37-2025, presented by Mr. Easterling and myself. This is the appropriation Parks Department would appropriate $15,000 of the Parks Revolving Fund to the capital budget of the Parks Revolving Fund for fencing and a new restroom at College Park and declaring an emergency. Are there any remarks for that? I think we've had enough discussion this evening, so unless it's super important, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
We are adjourned at 8:05.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We're going to take a 10-minute break and then come back and start the regular legislative meeting.
series of like twisted. Very-
All right, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. Just a reminder to put your cell phones on silent.
Oh my gosh, I can't get it.
All right, today is Monday, March 24th, 2025. Today is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. I call this meeting to order at 8:18 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Councilperson Gerhart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
James 1, verse 2, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lack wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to them." Thank you, Father, that you give wisdom generously. I ask for a cup running over of wisdom. Renew our strength to serve you and the citizens you've entrusted us with. Stretch these budgets, Lord. Help us be good stewards of what you've provided us, and may you abundantly bless our city. Thank you for every person on this council, within our administration, our first responders, and every citizen. May we never forget how blessed we are and how loved we are by you. Be over our decisions tonight. Heal any division and protect us from any evil that wants destruction. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Whoa, one step at a time. Thank you, Ms. Gerhart. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Greer.
Present.
Mr. Heidick.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Hager.
Here.
Mr. Easterling.
Here.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mrs. Beck.
Here.
Ms. Gerhart.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. So approval of the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, March 3rd, 2025 as presented. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the executive session from Monday, March 3rd, 2025.
Thank you. And Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion on approval of the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, March 3rd, 2025 as presented. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 10th, 2025 as presented. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, March 10th, 2025.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 10th, 2025 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are adopted. Acceptance of the Finance Department report for the month of February 2025 as presented. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the finance report for the month of February 2025 as presented.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second the motion on acceptance.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to accept the Finance Department report for the month of February 2025 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, finance report is accepted. Petitions and claims?
We have none.
Thank you. Matters requested?
Nothing dispersed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council? There were none. First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 36-2025 presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Authorized Payment, Retzel. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to authorize payment in the amount of $21,000 to Retzel for 2 invoices for legal services rendered and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Thompson's motion on suspension.
Thank you. It's moved by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 36-2025.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 36-2025. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 37-2025, presented by Mr. Easterling and Mrs. Thompson. Title, Appropriation Parks Department. An ordinance appropriating $15,000 from the unappropriated item of the Parks Revolving Fund to the capital budget of the Parks Revolving Fund to be used for fencing and a new restroom at College Park and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Mr. Easterly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Easterling's motion on suspension.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Easterling and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Easterling.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the adoption of ordinance number 37-2025.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Easterling's motion on adoption.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Easterling and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to adopt ordinance number 37-2025. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 38-2025, presented by Ms. Gerhart. Title, amending ordinance number 144-2009, posting places. An ordinance amending ordinance number 144-2009, designating 6 posting places used for the public notice for all resolutions and ordinances for the city of Barberton by adding 3 new posting places and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Ms. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Ms. Gerhardt's motion on suspension.
Thank you. It was motion by Ms. Gerhart and second by Ms. Beck to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 38-2025.
Thank you. Mrs. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Ms. Gerhardt's motion on adoption.
Thank you. It was motion by Ms. Gerhart and second by Ms. Beck to adopt ordinance number 38-2025. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 39-2025, presented by Ms. Gerhart. Title, amend ordinance number 98-2022, designated outdoor refreshment area. An ordinance amending ordinance number 98-2022 by amending section 6, designated hours of operation from Thursday through Saturday to Monday through Sunday, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, Ms. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Ms. Gerhardt's motion on suspension.
Thank you. It was moved by Ms. Gerhart and seconded by Mrs. Beck to suspend the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Mr. Addick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be abstaining due to a potential conflict between the DORA and my private sector compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Addick. Are there any other remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick abstains.
Motion for, sorry, what's that?
Suspension.
No, I know.
Adoption.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion for adoption. Ms. Gerhart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 39-2025.
Thank you, and Mrs. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Ms. Gerhardt's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Ms. Gerhart and seconded by Mrs. Beck to adopt ordinance number 39-2025. Are there any comments? I'd just like to say, when abstaining, can we have the council member mention that during the roll call?
Didn't I?
No, he wants me to say it.
I want the council person to say it.
Okay, that's fine.
If you could, thank you. That was just a note. Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Abstain?
Thank you. I got all whacked out. That threw me off. Motion for adoption carries.
Okay, this ends the first readings.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have done second, we have
Oh.
second reading. Third reading of ordinances we did.
That's what you said. You said we have none.
You
said
third.
Third reading of ordinances, resolutions? Oh, second reading of ordinance. They're so close together on my piece of paper.
We need to start bringing food.
Third reading.
His blood sugar's low.
Ordinance number 22-2025, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, 2025 Operating Budget and Capital Budget. An ordinance adopting a budget for various funds of the City of Barberton for the period beginning January 1st, 2025, and providing for the administration thereof and declaring an emergency. This is the third reading. The first reading was on February 24th, 2025. The second reading was on March 10th, 2025.
All right, given the complexity of how the amendments are going to work for this, I'm just going to go around the room. Instead of asking for a motion to adopt this now, we're just going to go around the room independently to each council person. If you have amendments that you would like to put forward, you can make the motion for each individual amendment you have. It will need a second from anybody on the floor, and then we'll take a roll call vote if it does receive a second. If it does not receive a second or the vote fails, then we'll just move along. So we'll start with Councilman Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I motion to amend the planning department's operation and maintenance in the general fund, reducing it $50,000 and increasing the planning department's personnel service budget of the general fund by $50,000 with the intent of not renewing Insight.
Is there a second? Ms. Gerhart?
I would like to second what Mr. Heidick just said.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Ms. Gerhart to amend the budget. I didn't have the wording in front of me, I apologize, but you just said it. Clerk, can you call the roll on that amendment?
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
No.
All right. The motion, motion for the amendment carries. Mr. Heidick, do you have any other further amendments?
I have no further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Beck, do you have any amendments?
Thank you, no.
Councilperson Gerhart, do you have amendments?
Not anymore.
Councilperson Harris, have any amendments?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I propose to amend the operations and maintenance of the recreation programs from down to $16,800. So a reduction of $8,200.
The parks.
Hmm?
I said the parks activities.
It's in the recreation programs. That's what I was told. This would be for the camera stuff, the hotspots.
Of the parks
Not yet.
budget?
Yes.
Okay. that's what
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I said parks. Recreation programs in the parks, general fund. General fund expenditures, I should say.
All right. Is there a second? Mrs. Thompson?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion was made by Mr. Harrison, second by Mrs. Thompson to amend the budget, whatever that he just mentioned. Is there any comments or remarks on that? All right. Clerk, can you call the roll for that amendment?
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
All right. Motion for that amendment carries. Do you have any further amendments?
Yes, sir.
Shoot.
Parks budget, under the Parks Administration, reduce the capital outlay from $75,000 down to $25,000. Return that $50,000 to the general fund, please.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. The motion was made by Mr. Harris and seconded by Mr. Easterling to make the proposed
What are
amendment.
they using that? No.
Proposed amendment changes to the budget. Are there any comments?
My
Ms. Beck?
question, is this
This
the one that
was,
they were gonna use with the basketball courts and the pocket parks?
yes, the $25,000 would be for Wells Park. That's what we would leave there.
It's
The
just-
pocket parks, excuse me, there's no plan for them right now. I don't see why we need to put $50,000 there when we can return it to the general fund, and if we need it down the road for something more important, which I think there is more important things, then we could use it for that. We can't take care of the parks that we have now. I mean, we have parks sitting, Harder Park, vacant, nothing there. I mean, there's no reason to put $50,000 into pocket parks or try to obtain other parks that we don't need right now. I could take that $50,000 and use it on some infrastructure project. I don't think that $50,000 is a wise use of it to buy pocket parks. That's my explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further comment? Clerk, can you call the roll on the amendment?
Mrs. Beck?
No.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Motion for the amendment carries. Mr. Harris, do you have any other amendments?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. All right, we'll go down the other side here. Mrs. Thompson?
Yes. I'd like to motion to amend the Finance Department operation and maintenance budget of the general fund by reducing it $10,000.
All right. I'm sorry, did you make a motion for that? Or were
I
you just
did.
saying? Okay, is there a second?
A second.
All right. Mr. Griffin. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and a second by Mr. Griffin to amend the budget. Are there any comments? Mr. Harris?
I just want to let everybody know this is stuff that we've discussed. Thanks, Mr. Flaker, for saying you would agree with that 10,000 back. Appreciate that. Taxpayers appreciate that. That's it. Thank you,
All right, are
Mr.
there any
President.
other comments? Mrs. Thompson?
Yes, just to go off what Mr. Harris said, all of these we have discussed in prior weeks. Mr. Flaker just wrote it all out for us, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Clerk, can you call the roll on that amendment, please?
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Easterling.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Motion for the amendment carries. Mrs. Thompson?
Okay, next I'd like to motion to amend the removal of the capital budget of the Safety, Human Resource, and Civil Service Departments in the general fund.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr.
I'll
Harris?
second that.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Harris to make another amendment to the budget. Are there any comments? Mr. Heidick?
I'm sorry, could that one be repeated?
To amend the removal of the capital budget of the Safety, Human Resource, and Civil Service Departments in the general fund.
To eliminate it or by a specific?
There was an amount, wasn't there?
Thought she was giving it back and then she wants $2,000 of it put back.
Yeah, $2,000 will be put back.
And that'll be a second, like another.
Mr.
Right,
Flaker.
so we take it all and then give her
So you want
$2,000 for a
zero
computer.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
this
yeah.
amendment?
Mr. Harris.
This is the, what Ms. Eisman and I talked about amongst everybody else here. She's going to give, in the Safety, Human Resource, and Civil Service Department, under the capital budget, there's 7,000 total. She's going to give back 5,000, or give that 7,000. We're going to take 2,000 of that and put it in her operation and maintenance, or some part of that. And then the other 5,000 would be returned to the general fund.
Okay, so zeroing out. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Are there any other comments? Clerk, can you call the roll on that amendment?
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Easterling.
Yes.
All right, motion for that amendment carries. Mrs. Thompson?
Okay, and to go with that last amendment, would like to motion to amend the human resource operations and maintenance budget of the general fund by increasing it $2,000.
All right, is there a second? Mr. Harris?
I will second Ms. Thompson's motion, please.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Harris to amend the budget. Are there any comments? Clerk, can you call the roll on that amendment?
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Easterling.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Motion for that amendment carries. Mrs. Thompson?
All right, lastly, I motion to amend the planning department's capital budget in the general fund by reducing it by $18,000 and increasing the planning department's operations and maintenance budget in the general fund by $18,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Mr. Heidick. Oh, man.
We're
All
just
right.
moving it.
A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to amend the budget. Are there any questions or comments about that amendment? Clerk, please call the roll for that amendment.
Mr. Easterling.
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mrs. Hager.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
All right, motion for that amendment carries. Mrs. Thompson? You have any further?
That is all.
All right. Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mr. Easterly?
I have none.
Mrs. Hager?
I have none.
All right. Clerk, can you please reread that? Ordinance 22, 2025?
ordinance number 22-2025 as amended tonight in council by vote. Presented by Mrs. Thompson, title 2025 Operating and Capital Budget. An ordinance adopting a budget for the various funds of the city of Barberton for a period beginning January 1st, 2025, and providing for the administration thereof and declaring an emergency as amended.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson, motion to adopt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 22-2025 as amended.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion is made by Mrs. Thompson and second by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 22-2025 as amended this evening. Are there any questions or comments?
I'm so sorry.
Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, when it comes to Insight, like I had said earlier, I think it would be nice if we can find a happy medium, if we can have some outside, a consult from somewhere else, as well as somebody who's designated within the planning department to work on economic development. I don't think Insight was doing a great job. I do think it would be important to have more team members. So, while I was on the fence about keeping them, getting rid of them, whatever, it looks like that's happening. So, but I just want to say I'm not against finding some more players for the team. So that is all I want to say.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank everybody. I will say that I would like to see the budget given to us sooner than the middle of February, because, this is our second time getting the budget and seeing, and I think we could make more cuts, personally, and I'd like to see us get it sooner than the middle of February, and then we're scrambling, like you said, the 11th hour. Today was the 11 and a half hour with Mr. Patterson from Parks. And I think we could cut more, but the 11th hour is, it just feels like everything was rushed. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Is there any other comments? Ms. Beck?
I think that with the Insight getting cut out of the budget, I think we have just cut our nose off to spite our face. And I think that we should all really pitch in to write that, however you want to put it, thrown the baby out with the bathwater, cut our nose off to spite our face. I think we have made a mistake tonight. And that will come back on us. So I hope you are all ready for that.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Is there any further comment? All right, clerk, can you call the roll for adoption?
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hager?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Easterling?
No.
Motion for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carries major majority since it is a thing, and motion carries. Motion for adoption carries.
Appointments? Oh, this ends the 30th.
Yes. I know, there's a lot going on.
I'm telling you.
I got a
It is
piece of
almost
paper here with
9
scribble
o'clock.
marks. I don't know what is what. All right.
You say it.
Appointments?
Thank you. To the Design Review Board, Jill McCune, for a term beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2027.
All right. Is there a motion to appoint Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I motion to appoint Jill McCune to Design Review Board to begin immediately and end December 31st, 2027.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to appoint Jill McCune.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to appoint Joe McCune for a term beginning immediately and ending 12/31/2027 for the Design Review Board. Are there any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying yay.
Yay.
I got you. Yeah, see, I'm paying attention.
can say silence.
Opposed? All right, Joe McCune is appointed. Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Is there anything from department heads? Anything from council? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to disagree with Councilor Beck's notion of cutting nose off to spite the face. We're an 8.5 square mile city. We only have so much room to expand. We only have so much room to build. Yes, there's room for improvement. But when it comes to so many drivers of economic development, if you look at the BCDC, you look at the CIC, you look at the foundation, you look at Main Street, look at all of our boards and commissions, okay? And when I say look at them, I say look at the names on them. You can print a piece of paper out right now. All those boards are the same damn people, just outside appointment from the city. Councilor Gerhardt, you sit on the BCDC board. How many of those people do you see on every single thing?
Quite a few.
When I was chair of finance, the foundation interim director kept sending me names that had to be approved by council. I strangled out every single one of them until they sent somebody that had never been there before and didn't set on anything else. I killed 3 appointments before they even saw the committee because I'm so sick of it. And if we want to say we've got to bring in outside counsel because we need more players on the team, how about we get rid of some of the dead weight on these teams? I mean, seriously, you wonder why things don't change in this city? Because the same people are looking at the same thing. You look at the development code. How long did it take us to redo that? How long is it going to take us to get the master plan? Probably because this commission's built to the same people, save 1 or 2 here or there. But when we say we're cutting our nose to spite our face, this group may have done some great work. When the mayor said that a place that wanted information or something called them first. That's embarrassing. They called them. Somebody that doesn't even work for the city, that's just contracted, they didn't even call the city. That's embarrassing as a whole. What should have been a crutch to economic development turned into a lifestyle. And sometimes you have to change that lifestyle to get the ship right. Sometimes you have to cut the nose off the face and get a nose job. Sometimes we have to Michael Jackson this thing and get somebody in that department and get her people to make this damn thing work. Because the ship's not going to right if all we're doing is shoving people off the plank every 5 minutes. We got to stabilize that department. We got to get the people in position, and we got to let them do their jobs. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. Is there anything else from the body? I'd just like to say, next week is the 5th week, so we don't have council, so we'll see you guys next month.
The break.
Communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. When it comes to the budget and getting it to council faster, we're not sitting on the budget, waiting, wasting time. I don't see too many council members knocking down my door to have budget meetings. Doors open. When it comes to economic development and the various players throughout town, those boards are volunteer positions that are part of approving loans or grants or what have you. They don't take an active role in, nor should they, in going door to door or business visits or knowing the innermost workings of state and federal grants. Again, I don't see, when it comes to economic development, from anyone knocking down my door. If you want change, don't keep it to yourself. Don't let it be a secret. Let's talk. You may, again, communication's two-way street. You may not know what we're planning or looking at, but you won't know unless you ask. If there's great ideas out there and you're tired of the same old, or what you perceive as the same old, don't see anyone knocking on my door. You really don't have to knock because the door's open. Just walk right in. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. President, I'd like to second that motion to adjourn.
It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Yay.
Yay. Yay. All right, opposed? Didn't think so. This meeting is adjourned at 8:53 PM.
No, this has to be tested.